This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Leaders in South Sudan agreed to form a unity government by Saturday deadline. The number of coronavirus cases continues to drop in China, with businesses working to get back on track. And the UN hopes ceasefire talks on Libya can still be salvaged. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and still to come in the program. In business news, Kenya is set to issue a $1.5 billion roads bond. And Nigeria now moves to stop milk imports. Let's begin the hour in South Sudan, where President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar have finally agreed to form a unity government by the Saturday deadline. This puts to rest questions on whether the deadline would be pushed back yet again. The previous deadline of November the 12th, 2019 had been postponed after the two parties failed to agree on various issues. Recently, President Kiir and Machar have been at odds over the number of states and their boundaries. President Kiir offered to reduce the provinces from the current 32 to 10 as was before. However, Machar's side rejected it. But it seems like these issues have been ironed out. Announcing the expected formation of the new government, President Kiir said the appointment of Machar as the first vice president would be done on Friday. Machar's allies will also be appointed to various positions on the same day. The swearing in of the leaders will be done on Saturday. Well, for more on that story, we are now joined by CGTN's Patrick Oyet in Juba. And here in our Nairobi studio, we have Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director at the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies in Kenya. Thank you so much for joining to you both. Patrick, we're going to start with you in Juba. South Sudan says it is going to form a unity government by that very important Saturday deadline. How are people reacting there, Patrick?
Hannah, people are very excited about this news. First of all, because of the way in which it was done, because President Salva Kiir met with opposition leader Riek Machar, then they came out and made the announcement as a team, and President Salva Kiir said on Friday morning he is going to actually appoint Dr. Riek Machar as the first vice president, and that therefore means, of course, that the current government has to be dissolved, because at the moment there is also a first vice president who is General Taban Dengai. So that means he cannot appoint another first vice president when there is another vice president. So the current government will be dissolved, and then he will appoint Dr. Riek Machar as the first vice president and move the process now forward. So people are very happy, because before this, the situation was uncertain. People were not sure of what was going on. Some people were even leaving the country. But now with this announcement, people are happy. We've moved around. We've been talking to them. People are happy. Normally, on such a day, you would find the streets are empty. People are scared. But now, even as we speak now, the streets are still busy. People are going about doing what they're supposed to do. So, yes, it is received well here in South Sudan.
Dr. Kanenje, I'm going to come to you. Just from on the back of what Patrick has said now, it almost sounds as though there's relief from the people of South Sudan, because it has seemed like, it has been back and forth between these two leaders for them to get to this point where they are saying by Saturday we are going to see that unity government. We are hearing some details that are coming out from the president, exactly how that's going to unfold. Speak to us about how important this agreement is, not only to South Sudan, but also to the region as well.
This comes at a particularly important time because the recent conflict has cost about 400,000 lives, with millions more displaced. And to the region, it has imposed an unacceptable level of economic damage, death, destruction, and it had just made life increasingly difficult. Even efforts to move towards regional integration have actually been impossible, largely due to the conflict in South Sudan. So I think it's such a relief, not just to South Sudan as a country, but the region at large, especially the Horn of Africa region.
Patrick, we're going to come back to you in Juba. I mean, there are times, and we've been covering this at CGTN for a long time and comprehensively, and getting your input as well has helped so much, Patrick. And one of the things that we see sometimes is when we get these reports from South Sudan is sometimes the people people on the ground just being so emotional about what this has been like for them living through this. Speak to us about this agreement, just in terms of how it's going to be implemented. We've heard a little bit about what the president is planning to do Friday and then Saturday, but give us some more details, Patrick.
Yes, Hannah. What is going to happen is that, one, the current government is going to be dissolved. And then, as President Salva Kiir said, he will appoint Dr. Riek Machar as first vice president tomorrow morning, Friday morning. This has two meanings. One is that he could only appoint Dr. Riek Machar and then they sit together and form the government together, or he can just appoint the whole cabinet, which is comprising of 5 vice presidents. By the way, Dr. Riek Machar is the first, and he's among the 5. Thereafter, he will have to appoint ministers who are numbering about 36 plus 9 deputy ministers. After doing that, then we are likely to see the first cabinet meeting of the new government meeting, and then after that, there will be now the parliament will be formed, because the parliament also has to come from, or members of parliament have to come from these parties to the peace agreement. So we will see a formation of the parliament probably in the coming week, and then the implementation of the agreement now would move forward.
Thank you so much for that, Patrick. Dr. Kanenja, let's just speak a little bit about that, because even though there is excitement, and this is really great that this has happened, that these two sides have even come to this point, and that we're not talking about months in advance. We're talking about tomorrow, we're talking about Saturday coming, and that's going to be pretty soon. But speak to us about what needs to happen for this agreement to hold, because it sounds like there's still a lot of work that's going to need to be done.
Yeah, a conflict as intractable as the one, for South Sudan, of course, there's going to be plenty. It cannot be fixed in one day. However, I think the current move towards implementing the agreement is something positive. Now, number one, of course, we expect Riek Machar is going to be appointed first vice president. But one thing that is important is to integrate the forces, for instance. You still have a lot of armed men and women out there, who are just running rampant. That is something that has to be done. But more critically, you have to ensure the economy starts working again for South Sudan by ensuring you rationalize the states, but also make them viable. Beyond that, I think other things cannot be predicted. However, if they commit to what they've decided to do, especially when with the coming agreement on Saturday, I think we're going to see peace in South Sudan and in the entire region.
That's going to be really good news, and I'm sure so many people in South Sudan really looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Dr. Kanenja. Thank you so much, Patrick, joining us there from Juba. Well, CGTN's Patrick Ayet has been following the unfolding events in Juba, and he filed this report.
The agreement reached by the two leaders will see a unity government formed this week as scheduled, but the unified forces of opposition groups and government are still undergoing training. So President Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar agreed that the country's security be provided by President Salva Kiir's forces for now.
I would like to tell the people of South Sudan that the change that is coming is the change that will end war in the country. It's a change that will bring peace. It's a change that will bring development. We are done with war. War destroys development.
The former warring parties say contentious and unresolved issues would be tackled by the new administration.
We have agreed to form the government as scheduled on or before the 22nd of February.
South Sudanese people in the capital, Juba, are reacting to the news of the agreement between the former warring parties.
If there's peace in the country, the standard of living will be high, like in China. People are having good infrastructures, good building, good roads, but here in Juba, we are not having good roads. As peace is coming back, we have to improve on roads and communication.
The United Nations says the 6-year civil war in South Sudan has killed more than 350,000 people. It has triggered food insecurity and displaced more than 4 million people. An attempt to implement a previous peace deal signed in 2015 collapsed when President Salva Kiir's forces clashed with opposition troops loyal to Riek Machar in Juba in 2016. Many here now hope the implementation of the current peace deal would go as planned to end violence in the country once and for all. Patrick Ayet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Meanwhile, the African Union says it is convinced that the transitional government of national unity in South Sudan will bring lasting peace to that country. CGTN's Koleto Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa on the effort of AU and other entities in the South Sudan mediation process.
There have been over 6 years of mediation in South Sudan's internal conflict between the factions of President Salva Kiir's government and opposition leader Riek Machar's support base. The African Union led the process through the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD.
IGAD has also played a pivotal role in addressing the conflict in South Sudan. Of course, we are not oblivious to the many challenges that still persist.
And these are the faces of the conflict: the over 1 million refugees and internally displaced South Sudanese. Along with other members of the international community, China has been part of the South Sudan peace process, urging the leaders to put their personal interests aside and work for the well-being of all the South Sudanese. A power-sharing deal between President Salva Kiir's government and opposition faction in 2018 has been extended twice, in May 2019 and November 2019. At the just concluded African Union summit, the continental leaders met the warring factions to ensure the February 22nd deadline for the transitional government of national unity would stand.
We have pursued our efforts of consultation with IGAD for peace building and reconciliation in South Sudan, where the parties have been strongly encouraged to speed up the process of pacification and reconciliation in the country. The formation of a government of national unity within the time frame that has been set is an exigency, and it is a necessity for restoring peace.
The African Union says the only sticking issue, which was a reduction of the number of states, has been solved by President Salva Kiir's recent declaration that the regional states be reduced from 32 to 10.
It was a hard decision that he made, but for the sake of peace and unity of the country and the tranquility of the country and the reconciliation of the South Sudanese people, the president took that decision, in which he said, let the country go back only to 10 states, as it was.
The government says changes can be made after the transition period.
30 months is not a big deal. After the 30 months, we will go for elections, and the people of South Sudan will speak. They will choose the leaders. They will choose their president. They will be the masters. And then the number of the states will be in their hands. How many states they want will be in their hands.
The African Union Peace and Security Council visited South Sudan on 19th February to seek assurance from the South Sudan government that come 22nd February, the continent's youngest nation will begin its political transition and a journey towards lasting peace. Koleto Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, here's CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy now with a look back at some of the key events that have taken place in South Sudan.
Riek Machar was appointed vice president in 2011 as part of a transitional unity government, but was dismissed with the rest of Kiir's cabinet. In December 2013, a civil war was ignited in South Sudan when violence broke out in Juba, killing approximately 1,000 people. Subsequent power-sharing agreement between President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar have not held. A steady level of fighting, averaging over 800 violent events per year since 2013, has persisted since the start of the war, resulting in an estimated 400,000 deaths. The number of people who have been forcibly displaced has continuously increased since the start of the war, revealing the cumulative humanitarian impact from instability. In August 2015, the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan was signed. In July 2013, Riek Machar fled Juba, with 200 people killed the following day. Officials say the people of South Sudan must understand the provisions of this latest agreement if it's to hold.
People are the custodians of this peace agreement, and they must understand the key provisions of the peace agreement. It is only when they understand the provisions of this peace agreement that they can be able to support the peace agreement.
Kiir and Machar agreed again in July 2018 to share power with a revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict signed in September 2018. Now the two leaders are set to form the long-awaited government of national unity in Juba.
If they can own this peace agreement, then they can be able to live by the peace agreement and implement whatever is in the peace agreement, and that is one way to ensure lasting peace in this country.
Salva Kiir was elected president of the region of Southern Sudan in 2010 and inherited the presidency upon the country's independence in 2011 under a clause in the transitional constitution of the Republic of South Sudan. The constitution authorized a 4-year presidential term and a 2-term limit. There have been no presidential election in South Sudan since 2010. Still, Salva Kiir remains in power. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, we now bring you the latest on the coronavirus or COVID-19 outbreak. The total number of confirmed cases in China has surpassed 74,000. The death toll is now at over 2,000, while more than 16,000 people have recovered. The country reported less than 400 new cases on Wednesday. Hubei province, where the outbreak began, reported more than 300, a dramatic drop from previous days. The daily new cases outside Hubei have dropped for 16 consecutive days. The provinces of Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Henan have also been hit hard, with each reporting more than 1,100 cases. Meanwhile, Beijing has reported 395 and Shanghai 334. The virus has spread to 25 other countries, which altogether have reported over 1,000 cases. Japan is the worst hit, with 3 deaths and more than 700 cases. Most of them are passengers from the Diamond cruise ship docked in Yokohama. A man and a woman in their 80s who were on board that cruise ship died after contracting the virus. Well, most residents in the city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak, are still required to stay at home. Buying daily necessities may pose a challenge for many. Authorities have rolled out countermeasures to help in several ways. CGTN's reporter Yu Jinshang has the details.
3 weeks ago, Wuhan's fruit and vegetable markets looked like this.
This is now rare customers here after authorities tightened the lockdown amid a spreading coronavirus. But how do people get their food necessities? Let's find it out.
The government on Monday issued restrictions on individual shopping in supermarkets. Our service now is only available to emergency, community, and some group purchases. So far, our store has received over 1,000 requests from 2 designated communities, and we've prepared 13 family plans for them.
But before following them on their trip to one of the communities, we asked store patrons how they feel about this group purchase.
It is totally inconvenient for individuals, but the centralized management and accessible purchasing channels can secure basic everyday needs. The serious epidemic situation puts limits on a high-quality life, and that also requires us to be positive to pull through.
Some 120 packages arrived at a community in Wuchan district, where there are about 4,500 households. That's definitely far from enough.
We've also encouraged our residents to order necessities on e-commerce platforms, where 8 stores are available. Then we will notify each of them once their deliveries arrive at the gate.
Ying admits the insufficiency of supplies and deliveries, adding that understanding from residents comforts and motivates them to keep working hard.
This is much safer. The community and the volunteers here are so considerate. We support and thank them.
Mrs. Yu, also a volunteer in the community, leads her family more to group purchases online.
Since the outbreak, we've increased our group purchases of food, which I feel is economic and fresh. In order to decrease contact, we volunteers come to fetch deliveries for our residents.
Though doing this doesn't satisfy everyone, Yu says she cares for everyone.
It's still a lot to come in and out like this. We advise the community to prepare info tags for each package. We can carry out the deliveries so that residents need not come over here.
That might require more hands, but Yu says volunteers are quite willing to do this, in addition to their daily efforts in screening and disinfection. Zhou Jiaxing, CGTN, Wuhan.
Meanwhile, China's economy is slowly getting back on its feet. CGTN senior editor Douglas Okwach said this as he was attending a talk show on Kenya's Switch TV. Switch TV is fully owned by the Red Cross. Its primary viewers are youth from Kenya and other African countries. During the show, Okwach spoke of China's latest efforts in fighting the COVID-19 outbreak and what African governments are doing to prevent the spread of the virus. He also touched on what the Chinese government is doing to get business operations back to normal.
All right, it's been a panic situation for quite some time here in the country, all over the world, and the coronavirus thing, and of course the virus itself, also now known as COVID-19, has been something that indeed no one can miss to mention. And in studio, I'm actually proud to be joined by Douglas Okwach from CGTN. He's a Talk Africa editor to give us now what's happening on the ground in China and of course in some other areas here in the continent. Good to see you, Bwana Douglas, today.
Thank you, Nick.
All right.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. So let's quickly go into the thick of things, because now when you talk about these updates, every day is a new day as far as the virus is concerned. And so many fears, especially in the continent, is coming through. But look, we had a case in Egypt. How was it handled, first of all?
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. I think this is a very important topic that we need to thrash out.
Mm-hmm.
I think there should be no need for panic. I think panic comes about because of widespread misinformation.
Okay.
And as like yourself has already stated, there hasn't been so far, and I repeat so far,
okay,
on the African continent, a confirmed case of coronavirus.
Okay.
Initially, the situation might have looked a little bit dicey.
Okay.
Because at the beginning, only 2 African countries had the capacity to test, to screen for the virus,
all right,
which was Senegal and South Africa. And you remember even the Kenyan case, the samples were actually taken to South Africa,
okay,
and they turned out negative. I think the situation is getting better, and now, apart from South Africa, other African countries like Ghana, Madagascar, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone have joined the pack of African countries that now have the capacity to screen for the virus.
Absolutely.
And I think within a short time, there'll be about 36 African countries. That's more than half the number of countries on the continent.
Okay.
So that should be reassuring for us enough. Regarding what has happened on the China end of things, I think it's not enough to say how much China has done. I think China's response was timely.
Okay.
It was on a very, very large scale, unprecedented, and it's received all-round praise, including from the World Health Organization. The international community generally has been pleased with how China has handled the situation. And as we talk now, I think there's already a report done by China's own Center for Disease Control, and which it has shared with the WHO. And on the basis of that report, the WHO says it will not revise the risk status of coronavirus globally. So that should be reassuring enough. I think a lot is being done on the Chinese side. And the statistics, like we say, keep changing. But what we are noticing more now is a downward trend of infection rates, of deaths. So if it had spiked I think we are now beginning to see it climbing down.
All right. Looking back to China as a nation, the economy is kind of shaky right now. And when you talk about even some companies in Japan having had to close down because most of their main spare parts coming from China, how is the recovery tactic here?
I think China is doing a lot to turn around, to put in a reverse gear the general slowing down trend caused by the coronavirus. But what we are seeing is that China is trying to implement a lot of measures that are business friendly. For example, we are seeing tax cuts. We are seeing rebates. We are seeing low interest loan rates. And we are seeing insurance claims of companies that were affected by the coronavirus being fast-tracked for payment. And we are seeing also China injecting up to $1.7 trillion yuan into the financial markets to give it a kick. We are seeing China reducing the bureaucracy for businesses. We are seeing China giving priority to enterprises and companies that make medical kits, that import agricultural products. So a lot is being done in China, as you've heard, to kickstart the economy. And there's a vote of confidence issued by big companies, like Hyundai has just resumed manufacturing.
But not fully.
Not fully, of course. It's a bit slow, but it will catch up. Not fully, but it's yeah.
CGT and Africa have been sharing the latest information on the COVID-19 outbreak with African media houses. Local journalists say the corporation is helping to curb misinformation that can cause unnecessary fear and panic. Kenya Switch TV anchor Nicholas Mudimba says misinformation on COVID-19 can lead to discrimination and stigmatization. According to him, it undermines people's willingness to follow legitimate public health advice.
How would you describe the cooperation between CGTN and the local media in terms of providing factual information on the outbreak by engaging local media houses such as yours?
The beauty about it is that now the cooperation or the partnership with the local media means now the Kenyans will be getting factual news. And you see, once we depend so much on international news, that means we're getting conflicting figures, conflicting reports. Now the partnership itself will help now the locals in the country understand the real issues on the ground, because now as CGTN, you have the first-hand information coming from China. So that for me, that means it will be easier for the locals to understand that indeed CGTN says it now through other media houses. That means now we're getting the right information.
CGTN is also facilitating interviews with our correspondents back in Wuhan in China at the epicenter with local media. Do you think that as well goes a long way in creating confidence in how China is trying to control this, and in terms of also doing away with misinformation?
Yeah, sure. I've watched a good story on CGTN about a reporter who went and visited a patient in hospital. That's big. And you see, by having that confidence as a reporter, as a team, to go directly to this affected person, it shows something. It shows that indeed the recovery methods or the recovery kind of ways are really successful. So for me, as CGTN, I can say doing a good job in terms of now publicizing all the situation, from the affected ones to the recovery methods, how they actually taken through recovery. People have died of this. You don't get to see the good stories about the recovery. So for me, CGTN is doing a good job in terms of just making sure that people understand that this thing is being fought in all ways.
As a journalist, just give us your thoughts on how China has approached this fight against coronavirus.
You mentioned something interesting, because through our phones, through the news we see, one thing I have to commend the Chinese people is that the discipline. Trust me, you know, by the time you tell someone to self-quarantine him or herself for 14 days, already that's big. And this is someone who follows it. I'm very sure you've seen someone delivering the masks in a police station. That was very big. You see, there's humanity also in it.
I saw that video, yes.
Absolutely. Very nice. Now, when you talk about a hospital, 10,000 bed hospital coming up in a record time of 10 days, that's something great because now they want to get rid of this thing once and for all. Something else is that, you know, the spread of coronavirus, unfortunately, yes, it's something that some even doctors have suffered from it. But look at the humanity. This doctor was trying to save a life. That's why at the end of the day, they contracted the virus. I know sometimes maybe some survive, some won't, but still look at the humanity angle here. They came, touched the patient, were in contact with the patient, fighting this thing, and then they succumbed to it. So for me, I feel like from 10,000 hospital beds in a record time, the government injecting trillions of yuans in the economy to fight this. And also one tactic I really loved about this, about using drones and loudspeakers to tell guys, this is what you need to do, this is what you don't need to do. That was actually a very, very big measure. So for me, where I'm seated, I feel like the government has done so much, enough, and also just coordinating even with the World Health Organization. That has been a very big thing because now being compliant means you can be helped also in this. So for me, Chinese government is doing so much.
Well, here at CGTN, we will continue to bring you comprehensive coverage on the COVID-19 outbreak. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return to more news making headlines right here on Africa Live.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's head over to Nigeria now, where the governor of Borno State says the country's military needs 100,000 new soldiers to turn the tide against the Boko Haram insurgency. Militants have been launching attacks in Nigeria for over 10 years now, despite government efforts. CGTN's Phil Ihaza reports from Abuja.
The governor, Babangana Zulum, made the statement in Maiduguri, the state capital, during a visit by some lawmakers who came to seek ways to assist the state after recent Boko Haram attacks. According to the governor, the war against Boko Haram cannot be won without adequate military personnel, technology, and funding. He recommended 100,000 more people to be recruited to the Nigerian army, with at least half the number enlisted from Borno State. Boko Haram has continued to attack towns in Borno State despite claims by the federal government of winning the war against the insurgents. A recent deadly attack occurred on February 10, where the insurgents killed 30 people in Auna, a town 20 kilometers from Maiduguri. Over 30,000 people have lost their lives in the past decade, and more than 2 million more have been displaced as a result of the fight against the terrorist group. However, President Buhari paid a visit to the state last week after the news of the attacks and commiserated with the affected victims. He assured citizens that his administration will frustrate the operations of Boko Haram and claimed the terrorist days are numbered. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The police in Lesotho now say 80-year-old Prime Minister Thomas Tabane is to be charged with the murder of his estranged wife, Dipolelo Tabane. The announcement came shortly after Tabane announced that he would be stepping down in July because of old age. Angela Coppola has more.
It's understood that authorities in the Mountain Kingdom will most likely press murder charges, and those are formal murder charges, against the current Prime Minister of Lesotho before the end of the week. It's also being reported now that Tabane may well face other unspecified charges that are, however, related to the murder. Local police have already charged his current wife, Masia Tabane, with that murder. This after she turned herself in, having been on the run for several weeks in South Africa. She's been on bail since the 5th of February and hasn't been were asked to plead just yet. In 2017, Thabane's ex-wife Lipolelo was gunned down at close range on the side of a dirt road on her way home to a small village near the capital, Maseru. At the time of her murder, she was involved in a bitter divorce with Thabane, who now becomes the first leader in Southern Africa to be charged with murder while still in office. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, that's it for me for now, but I will be standing by for more current affairs, including all your sport action. But for now, here's Uche with the latest in business news.
Thank you, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya is set to issue a $1.48 billion road bond. And Nigeria now moves to stop milk imports. Let's start off in Kenya. The country is set to issue a $1.48 billion road bond in June. The bond will be the first whose proceeds are dedicated to building and maintaining the East African nation's road network. Now, according to the country's infrastructure department, proceeds from the bond will also be used to pay pending bills to contractors and finance new work. Local media reports indicate that a second road bond will be issued in September. President Uhuru Kenyatta's government has been criticized for tripling Kenya's public debt load since he came to power in 2013. It now stands at over $60 billion by the end of 2019. And the off-grid solar industry has grown into a market worth $1.75 billion every year. A new report from the World Bank and the industry trade body shows that the industry provides lighting and other energy services to over 420 million users around the world. Now, since 2017, revenue from the off-grid solar industry has been increasing by 30% annually. To date, more than 180 million off-grid solar units have been sold worldwide. Now, the sector attracted about $1.5 billion in investments since 2012. Here in Africa, Kenya remains a key growth market on the continent.
We aim at providing a really impactful response that make a difference on this population. So numbers, 1 billion people without access to energy in the world, 600 million in Africa, which is roughly half of the population. Some countries being better than others, and I think if you ask me where is Kenya, probably Kenya is part of the leading countries. Kenya is higher than 50% electrification rate, and is also a country where since a long time ago the government has put in place a series of initiatives, legal framework that enable private companies to operate solar lanterns, solar home systems and provide this access, making Kenya the second largest market in the world after India on solar lanterns and solar home systems. So really Kenya is leading the way today.
Meanwhile, Kenya's biggest telecom operator, Safaricom, will consider awarding a contract to China's Huawei as it rolls out its commercial 5G network in 2020. Now, the firm's acting CEO, Michael Joseph, said Safaricom would follow guidelines from its two main shareholders, South Africa's Vodacom and Britain's Vodafone. Now, involving Huawei in Safaricom's 5G network could hamper talks on a free trade agreement between the United States and Kenya, which of course were announced this month. The Trump administration has been urging its European allies and other countries not to use any products from Huawei. They are arguing that it will compromise data security. Huawei is amongst Safaricom's key network equipment suppliers. And Nigeria's central bank is making it much harder to import milk and milk products into the country. It has restricted forex access for milk importers going forward. Only about 6 companies which have shown that the CBN deems to be sufficient investment in the dairy sector are exempted from these restrictions. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam with more.
It's been days after Nigeria's central bank released its milk import policy, and the effect is now being felt here. The bank said it wants to reduce import dependence on milk and dairy products, as well as encourage growth of dairy farming. Only 6 major firms are exempted. It turns out quite unfavorable for traders like Nnamdi, who deals in baking supplies and sells a wide variety of dairy products. He complains that the price of this commodity has almost doubled.
We don't have any local production of milk in Nigeria. All the milks all of them that have been imported. They're supposed to have started industry in Nigeria before they ban it. They're supposed to have started something, begin to develop something, so that the product that are being produced will cushion the effect of scarcity of milk.
Nigeria spends around $1.5 billion on milk imports annually. But the policy hopes to spiral upwards local milk production by 50,000 metric tons from the current 500,000 metric tons within the next year. However, the nation's 200 million population consumes an average 1.7 million metric tons of milk.
Those deficits are bound to be there, but the thing is that government has to start from somewhere. The market reacts to it. Those who have milk will hoard the milk and then expect and induce a rise in the price of milk. So you see a short spike in the price, but over a short period of time, there will be equalization.
Experts say the long-term impact is encouraging, especially with additional perk of low-interest loans for local milk producers.
We're going to have a lot of investment going into dairy, which GDP picks that up. We'll see aggregate production come up, which increases GDP, and you see aggregate consumption increasing. In all 3 cases, they will increase GDP.
Nigeria has been looking to diversify its economy from oil, reduce imports, and boost local production. The Apex Bank had put a ban on a list of commodities from accessing foreign exchange officially. So this now brings to 44 the total number of import items banned for foreign exchange by the central bank. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, South Africa's economy may find itself in deeper trouble in weeks to come, and that's if its statistical department doesn't get a cash injection. Statistics SA has been in need of extra funding for years now after its budget was cut due to the government's financial constraints. CGTN Sumitra Naidu takes up that story.
Statistics South Africa is a globally recognized center of excellence for producing official statistics. Over the years, it's improved data collection and analysis and taken on new statistical reporting. But funding has been reducing.
This year, I think we were first promised 50 million, then it became 46, then it became 45. And they've said you're going to get 45 million in April on condition that you further cut your staff. And we're saying, come on, this is the exact opposite. We need to increase our staff, not cut them. We're sitting on a 20% vacancy rate, which means that people are being stretched to do far more work than they should. So we're trying to wave the red flag now, rather than wait for something to go terribly wrong.
The situation is so dire that the entire Statistics Council wants to resign, arguing that they simply can't do their jobs credibly anymore.
We will resign, the entire council. If we resign, my Statistician General is unable to release official statistics. And we're obliged immediately to inform the IMF, for example. We're a reporting agency for the IMF. We'll have to report to UN Stats, to Africa Stats and so on. If there's no council to endorse the release by the Statistician General of all official statistics, then frankly there are no official statistics. And that can be a very dangerous place to be in.
Understanding the importance of this department is critical. Statistics South Africa collates and analyzes data from every single sector of this economy in order for government to make important decisions and for the rest of the world to understand South Africa as a country.
Stats SA says it needs $17 million this year in order to continue its services. If this is not forthcoming in the budget allocations to be announced next week, this department may grind to a halt. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, Zimbabwe's Vice President Constantino Chiwenga has expressed his gratitude to China's president and the Chinese government in their ongoing campaign against the COVID-19 outbreak. He says he's confident the second largest economy in the world will recover from the damage inflicted by this epidemic.
I want to give my special gratitude to President Xi Jinping and the Chinese authorities for having come up with all the strategies which they put together to fight this deadly coronavirus in China, and also to coordinate with all the countries in the world, especially with WHO on this virus. Definitely, I have got the full confidence on the Chinese economy. Yes, this is the temporal setback that the population had to follow the orders which they were given by the authorities not to move from province to province in a bid to contain this deadly virus. But this is just temporary. The Chinese economy will just, just again pick up, and I'm not worried about it. I'm very confident about the Chinese economy.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but do stay with us. We've got lots more business news coming up ahead on Global Business Africa. For now, back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Uche. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. All your sport action when we return, including Africa Men's Beach Bowl Group B Olympics qualifiers set for Tanzania next week.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find